Hey there. This series is how to be a better field target shooter in 15 minutes. And what I'm doing is I'm talking to different field target shooters across the country about different topics regarding field target and getting some tips and advice for shooters like you to help you become a better field target shooter. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to Bill Rabbitt about ranging your target. And Bill is from Cleveland, Ohio. He shoots hunter PCP, and he dabbles some in WFTF PCP, and he's one of my fiercest competitors, but he's also a great guy and a good friend. And so he's going to talk to us now about ranging with Parallax. Well, hello, Bill. How are you?
Hey, great, Philip. How are you doing?
I'm good. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about ranging with Parallax. And I'm really excited to be talking to a hunter class field target shooter. I know you shoot WFTF too. You dabble in that, but for us hunter shooters, ranging is very challenging because we're restricted to 16 power, and especially on those far targets, it's very challenging. So I'm glad I'm talking to a hunter field target shooter. So describe to me what is ranging with Parallax. How is it used in field target?
All right, so I guess we'll start at what the parallax knob is on a scope. I think a lot of average shooters, field air rifle and firearms, don't know the importance of setting your parallax and taking out that error. Not only is it focusing both your reticle and your target, but it's putting them on the same plane. So if you have parallax error, that means your reticle is focused in one plane and your target is focused in another. And when you turn that knob, you're putting both images on the same plane.
Okay.
And so parallax error, if you have that set up wrong and you're looking at your crosshair at your aiming point, if you hit eyeball perfectly centered in the scope, you can actually see, if you move your eyeball around, you can actually see that reticle drift around your aiming point. So by taking that error out, by setting your parallax knob correctly, that crosshair should stay stationary no matter where you look through the scope.
Okay.
So not only the two things: one, setting it right so that you can see your reticle clearly and your target clearly, but two, it allows for a little bit of error if your eye isn't perfectly centered in the scope. And so how we use that in field target is we use it as a range finding device. Mm-hmm. So since we're shooting with unknown distances, one of the first things we do once we address a target is to focus both the reticle and our target. Once it's in focus, we'll look at what range it says on our parallax knob. Mm-hmm. But that takes some homework. So to set that up correctly.
Yeah, a lot of upfront work. And so how do you set up your scope for ranging then?
So the factory knob only comes with some default settings, the 10, 25, 50, 100, 200, and infinity. And a lot of people are like, I set it at 50 and forget it. No, in field target, you need to have a little bit more definition between the yardages. So let's just say you already have your scope mounted and leveled and your eye relief set. The first thing to do is to get your reticle in focus. And that is setting your diopter setting in the rear of the eyepiece. That's that blue sky or white wall test where you want to set it to the lowest power, look at a white wall where you don't have anything else in your view, and set that reticle clearly. And that'll help correct for any vision, whether you're farsighted or nearsighted, and take that out. So that's step one. Step two is to set up outside, set up a range. This is not a time to be macho. When I first did this, I was in my shooting position and trying to hold the gun steady as I was doing all the ranging. Now it's, if I get a new scope, I vice it or put it on a rest so that any of my movement doesn't, I say myself, you'll save yourself time if it's locked down. You don't have to worry about your movement. And then setting up measuring tape, and you lay out every yard from 10 to 20 yards, and then every 5 yards after that, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I'll put stakes in the ground, and on those stakes, I use old playing cards. So it's got nice crisp markings of whether the hearts are diamonds, or the opposite side where it's got a lot of fine details to focus on. And I'll hang it up with a thumbtack. Because when I'm ranging in the field, sometimes I like to look at the glint of the metal object clamps or something holding the target on. So yeah, that is the process. And I'll go through and look at a target, see where my wheel or my knob stops, and mark it in with pencil. The biggest thing is giving your eye some relief, because it's a lot of strain on your eye doing all these different distances. Yep. So my biggest pointer would be to take a break, look at something else, or even come back another day. It takes me, I would say 3, 4, 5 times before I feel solid with a wheel, with a yardage marking setup that I got. So
yeah, I do something very similar. I'll pencil it in, and then I'll come back either later that day or the next day and check again and see if I'm comfortable with those marks. I may adjust them a little bit. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, the other thing I'll do is I'll plot out. So the distance between markings kind of has a 1/x. Can you see that?
Sure.
1/x plot. So mine's actually pretty choppy. I decided to kind of measure my markings around, but it follows that 1/x curve. And so if your decrease in distance doesn't follow that, you're probably off a little bit.
Right.
And you can kind of tell, like, oh, why is my 50 to 55 larger than my 45 to 50? You know, something's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And probably a good thing we should mention is not all scopes will focus down to 10 yards. So the closest target that we're shooting is 10 yards. The furthest is 55 for after field target. So make sure that if you're buying a scope, make sure that it will focus down to 10 yards, because there's scopes out there that won't.
That's right. And then you got to deal with a close focus adapter and how to mount that. Yeah. That and side wheel. You know, there's some scopes out there that'll have the parallax adjustment on the objective bell ring.
Yeah.
That's pain. Do a side wheel parallax adjustment.
Yeah. So if you're not as familiar with field target, we've got these big side wheels on there. And the reason we have that is just to give us enough real estate, basically, to make our markings on that wheel so we can tell the difference between 50 and 55, or at least hope to.
Yep.
Very good. So what do you use to, well, let me ask this. Whenever I'm focusing, we've talked about the wheel, and you definitely need a wheel if you're doing field target, because to get that fine tune of ranging. Does it matter which way you move the wheel?
Yeah. So there's a thing in machining or any mechanism called backlash, where if you're moving something in one direction, if you're to immediately turn, whether it be a gear or a pin on a slot, there's inherently some play in that mechanism.
Yeah.
So if you're going towards one mark and then go back one way, you're not actually adjusting the scope, or it's not going to line up correctly with your mark. So no matter which way you do it, whether you range from far to near or near to far, always stay consistent when you set up the wheel and then when you use it in the field. Right.
So do the same. The end motion needs to be the same every time. When you set it up, when
are you a near to far? Are you a near to far or far to near?
Let's see. I go near to far. I go past focus, and then I come back into focus, I believe is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you do. Do you go from near to far and you just lock into focus, or do you go a little past focus and then come back? What do you do?
Come back. Exactly. So I'll get to, like, if it's a target somewhere out 50, 55, I'll go probably like 70 and then come back.
Right.
And then,
I think the reason, and I didn't invent that, of course, I was taught that. I think the reason we do that is sometimes you'll get into focus and your eye thinks it's in focus, and you don't know what focus is until you go a little past it. And then you're like, oh, okay, I just went past it, so I need to come back to it. That's my theory anyway.
Yep. The human eye corrects for things. It'll focus when you don't want it to.
Yeah.
And make up for that little error. So we force it kind of past to get something blurry and then come back.
And like what you said a while ago about when you're setting up a scope, give your eye a rest. Sometimes I'll do that in the middle of a match. I'm focusing on a target, and maybe I'm having a little trouble or I'm a little unsure. So I'll look down and I'll focus on a blade of grass or something just to reset my eye, and then come back to the scope again. I don't know if you ever do that.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Some people, I was shooting with Rossi, and at some point he's like, "What are you doing?" You're looking at the squirrels and stuff in between. I'm like, no, I'm trying to get my eye to focus on something other than the scope. That's how I can get back fresh in the scope.
Yep. Do you what do you use to make the marks, your final marks on your wheel? Do you use tape, print it out with a computer program? What do you use?
Yeah. So initially, I use a adhesive vac vinyl tape on there, which I'll use my pencil markings, and I'll mark on the wheel whether I actually scratch the wheel where my 55 is and where my 10 is. Then I'll peel that tape off and I'll lay it out on the table and measure the distance between 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth all the way, and then put that into a computer program and then print it out so that the markings are nice and crisp and waterproof. I've seen when I started off, I saw some people panicking in a rainstorm because their pencil markings were bleeding off, and so
so the tape that you're marking, then when you pull it off, it must be a kind of tape that doesn't stretch. So whenever you're pulling it off, you're not, you have accurate measurements. Okay, that's interesting.
Correct. Yeah, it's a pretty thick adhesive vinyl that I bought. And that's why I mark both the 55 and the 10, so that when I reapply it, that I'll start at the 55 because that's the most important. And then as I lay it down, I make sure that the 10 lines up with the 10 mark. Then I know I didn't get any stretch or any bunching or anything when I did it.
Gotcha. Have you noticed, and you're younger than me, maybe you haven't noticed this yet, but have you ever noticed your range markings changing over time? And it's not necessarily the scope or the temperature or anything like that. It's actually your eyes that are changing a little bit.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I guess I haven't had enough time to, and I'm at the point right now where I've got reading glasses. I just started wearing them because I tie in flies and going fly fishing, and I can't see my knots. I finally had to give up and get a pair. But no, I haven't. I haven't had the scope, and I've had this one. This is a Night Force NX8. I've had this one for 3 years now, and I haven't had them shift. I've had the same markings.
I'm going to cover this in another episode about temp shift, but I'm just curious if you have temp shift in your scope for cold weather versus hot.
Yep. Yeah. So temp shift is real. I think every scope has a little bit of temp shift one way or the other. And, there's a lot of theories on why it happens, but I think it's basically thermal expansion, whether it be the metals, the glass, the gas, the lubricants, something in there is expanding and contracting at different temperatures. Yeah. So if you shoot field target throughout the year where you got ranging different temperatures, or if you're traveling, up north here, I have cold numbers and hot numbers. So I have cold numbers below 57 degrees, then between 61 and 82, it's stable where I range like in the spring. And then it flips to my hot numbers at 82 degrees. Okay.
And is that just your 45, 50, and 55?
No, all of them.
All of them.
All of them shift a little bit.
Okay.
I've had some scopes that were consistent for each yardage. Like it was like eighth of an inch change on each one. This one, the NX8, I got there's more change in the further distance and less change at the smaller distance. So there's some variable. Okay. But every scope's different, and you got to figure it out, and and it takes some time. Yeah. And figuring out when it shifts. That's a big keeping your scope in the air conditioning, and then bringing it out on a hot day, and just range, and wait until you see it change.
I think you mentioned a while ago you make marks every yard up to 25 yards or 20. You say 20 yards or 25 yards, and then you go over 5. Yeah.
So for hunter field target. And it depends on the height of your scope. I think even if someone was shooting hunter field target and had a really high scope mount where they were bringing their scope way above their barrel center, I think you'd have to do a little bit, fine tuning a little bit more. But I do, because I have a normal setup. I think 2 5/8 from bore center to scope center. Mm-hmm. I do every yard out to 20. So 10 to 20, then every 5 yards after that. And then I could just estimate in between the two. But the reason why I do every 5 is I have distinctive marks that I shoot holdovers in hunter that I have for those 5 yards. Right. Anything else, we're at 16 power. It's hard to get anything better than that. that's where bracketing comes in, where I feel a little more confident where I can get some more fine tuning in with that.
Yeah, we'll talk
But
about
if you
bracketing in another episode.
in another one, yeah.
So if you've ranged something and it's between, you're pretty confident it's between 50 and 55. You don't have any marks between 50 and 55. Are you just kind of splitting the difference on your holdover, basically?
Yep. Yeah, I'll shoot 52 if I'm worried about it. And a lot of like big shoots, I think people aren't going to set a target right at 55 because they're afraid of, unless everyone brought tape measures out there or whatever, I think they're going to bring it on because they don't want people complaining. So if something's between 50 and 55, I'll shoot like somewhere in the middle.
Right.
52 holdover.
All right. Well, this is a lot of good information. Anything else you want to mention before we close this episode?
I guess one thing that I thought of when I was thinking about focusing is where in your reticle do you like to focus to use as a reference point? Because if you put the crosshair like right over the target, it gets a little bit busy. I'm an upper right hand quadrant where there's some MOA numbers. There's a 10 and written there. I use that area.
Okay, I think I haven't really thought about that. I think I'm focusing on like a screw or a knot or whatever, and I'm a little away from the crosshair and all the numbers and everything, just so I can get a clean view of it. I haven't really thought about that. Probably a little above the crosshair, I guess, is what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a clear area. And then I think the other thing I was thinking about was type of scope wheel. So like when I'm shooting pistol, I just shoot a 3-inch. I don't need that much of a diameter for this because we're only going out to 35 yards. Right. So I don't need that much definition. But then for hunter field target rifle, I'll use a 5-inch. I'm a round wheel. I know you're a comma guy.
Yeah.
So with the comma, what they're trying to do, there's your yardage gaps are larger at the smaller distance and tighter at the further distances. And by doing the comma, not only can you rotate it and put it in your case without having a big wheel, you can rotate it to a convenient spot, but it's trying to, at your shorter distance, the wheel diameter is small. At the furthest distance, the wheel diameter is large. So you get sort of a more evenly spaced between your yardages. And some people like that, like yourself.
Yeah, I like the comma wheel because I'm trying to get as much distance between my 50 and 55s as possible. And I'm just trying to get more real estate. Now, different scopes, maybe need more of a comma wheel than others. Some scopes probably you're just fine with a round scope, a circular scope, or a wheel.
Yeah. So. Then you need a special pointer, an edge pointer. Yeah.
I do like the magnetic wheels though. That is so handy. I'm so glad that's kind of come around the last, I don't know 5 years or 3 years. The magnetic removable wheels. Oh, that's so helpful.
Yeah. Especially for airline travel. I don't know if Tyler mentioned that, but that's one of the being able to take your wheel off quickly and not have it as a pressure point in a case while you're traveling is super important. Yeah. I mean, we just had someone have a March knob break off during a match.
Yeah, I saw that at Nationals. It wasn't just a minor thing. I mean, that thing came apart. It was unbelievable.
Yep. If you wanted to see what the inside of a scope looked like, you got to see it that day.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. I appreciate it. A lot of good information here. I think it's very helpful to people. I appreciate you being willing to share some of that information to the field target community.
Yeah. No, I could talk field target all day long.
I know.
Enjoy it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Take care, Phil.
See you.